the point is that your brain is limited in how much information it can function with at one time. And so the more you introduce information into that, the less it can focus on the task at hand. So if you are thinking about disproving the stereotype, then you are not thinking about the math problem that you're supposed to be doing. If you're thinking about disproving the fact that you can't shoot a basketball or play basketball because you're white, then you're not thinking about playing basketball. And the second that you take away from your cognitive resources, you're reducing your ability to do well in that particular thing. And that's how stereotype threat works.
Welcome to this next episode of Always Learning. Today we have Dr. William Jackson with us, who's the Executive Director of Village of Wisdom. He's also a very storied individual in that he has been recognized nationally for his work in various domains, but mostly in the area of Black learner support, community power, education, and culturally affirming learning spaces. I could go through your entire bio, but it would take a while. Dr. Jackson, you've done a few things in your life. Welcome, man. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, appreciate you for having me, Chris. It's exciting to be here talking with you today.
Well, I'm really excited because I'm deeply interested in how you build community power through multiple vehicles, right? You know, through education, of course, and programs, but also things like community garden projects or food projects or projects that bring the community together around more than just one kind of issue, but really build community and build community power. But you run an organization called Village of Wisdom, which is a nonprofit organization that brings Black parent power to bear. And this is something that as a Black parent and as a person who considers myself a parent activist, the one thing we really don't talk about often is power. We talk about issues or how to organize each other, organize each other and alike, but we don't really talk about how you build power over time and what's the vehicle for that. So I wonder if we could just start there with Village of Wisdom. Tell us more about the organization, kind of your theory of change and how you make change happen, and how's it going?
Yeah, I mean, so, the first thing I love to kind of say, or I think I should say more often actually, is that nobody starts an organization alone. We live in a culture where people like to kind of identify individuals because I think we like these like lion stories, these hero stories. And I think sometimes that strips away from some of our community power, right? So like this idea that you talked about community and community being important. And so, I come from the Black community. I was born in the Black community of outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And I went to a HBCU, Norfolk State University. I taught in Black schools and Atlanta public schools and Hampton City schools. And so all of those things drove me to the power of community, in particular, the power of Black parents. And so one of the things that really kind of pushed me to start Village of Wisdom was the disconnect I saw between how the public talked about the public narratives about who Black parents are and what I knew Black parents to be. Because of my background, like I've probably met thousands, if not like tens of thousands of Black parents over the life course these last 40 years. And I really can't remember any Black parents who didn't want the best for their children. Now, they might have not always been in the best place to do that. They might have not had the skills that they needed to do that, but they always wanted the best. And more often than not, Black parents I knew were doing a really, really good job of actually trying to make sure that their children had the best that they could offer. And because of that disconnect in like what was kind of more public in the narrative, the more public narrative, like, oh, well, deadbeat dads, welfare queens, like that it didn't match. And so, I thought a lot about like, okay, well, what does it look like to create an organization that instead of looking at Black parents as a problem, looking at them as the solutions that I knew them to be. And part of that also came from, I did a PhD program at UNC Chapel Hill. And one of the things I kind of came across later in my studies was this idea of racial socialization. Essentially, racial socialization is a theory pushed by Black researchers that when Black parents, an outcome of racial socialization, because racial socialization is just like how we talk to people or make people aware of a particular idea. In this case, how Black people make other Black people aware of what it means to be Black. The focus of racial socialization research typically looks at the conversations between parents and students. And so what we know is that when Black parents socialize Black children to feel good about their Blackness, they're more resilient to discriminatory experiences. And so obviously, if anybody's kind of done any research in education, we know that Black kids experience a fair amount of discrimination inside of schools. And it's not an if thing, it's like a when thing.
Mm,
And I didn't see a
mhm,
lot of people talking about how their interventions for Black children was going to help them deal with the fact that they were going to experience discrimination. And so when I came across this research that said, well, when Black parents make you feel good, say you're Black and beautiful, you're a Black genius, that actually makes you less likely to have a negative impact from the discrimination that you're experiencing. I was like, oh, let's try to do that on purpose. Let's lean into the solutions. Let's lean into the wisdom of Black parents. Like, let's make a commitment to the Black community, a
mm,
vow to protect Black genius by supporting Black parents and having these conversations that they're already doing. But oftentimes, because it's so much that kids experience, it's not enough, right?
mhm,
Like
mhm,
you really kind of got to overdo it as a Black parent if you want to kind of inculate or block out or try to kind of protect your child from those discriminatory experiences. You got to overdo like feeling good about your Black. And yeah, I mean that's a lot of kind of the origin story. There's a lot of really amazing people kind of along the way that helped me get to that point
mhm.
and start an organization.
I want to come back to this, but I want to just talk about you for a moment here. So you've got a bachelor's degree, you got a master's degree, excuse me, you have a doctorate. Something went well for you in life when it comes to
Mhm.
education. What went well? Like how do you get to from when you were 6 years old, for instance, to being
Yeah.
Dr. Jackson today, running a nonprofit the way that you're running it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, two things early on that happened is like one, I largely credit my mom for brainwashing me into believing that all scientists were Black. She would say that, George Washington
Yeah.
Carver, Charles Drew, Mae Jemison, like these are the people that she was making me aware of. I think she, noticed that maybe I had an early interest in science. And so that was something that she really kind of pushed and made. She did the whole affirmation thing, right? And then the thing that my dad taught me that I don't think a lot of people get is he was an aircraft mechanic, or he,
Hmm.
still
Hmm.
is. I mean, you never not a mechanic, I think, if you if you're a mechanic. But he would have these projects that he would work on, right? Like whatever it was that he was fixing, because he would fix stuff around the house, he would fix the cars, and a lot of times he would take on projects that were somewhat difficult. Um, and the thing that he taught me was that failure was never an endpoint. It was just data to figure out how to fix
Hmm.
something.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
have these projects where, he'd be working on a car or something in the house, and maybe it would take 2 weeks to complete. And I'd be there with him while he was trying to fix it. And, stuff wouldn't go right. And, he might curse and get mad or whatever. But the thing he never did was give up. And I think so many Black people, I think, well, I would say I have been exposed to a lot of Black people who have been taught that failure is basically the end, and they have to avoid failure because we are expected to be so excellent just to have access to anything. And
Mm.
that was never my relationship with failure, and I never had to kind of overcome that. And I never necessarily tied my specific intellectual ability to my ability to be successful. It was just like, I'm probably smart enough that if I try long enough, if I try hard enough, if I forget the fact that somebody told me no enough times, that I'll find a yes. And so I think my dad taught me that. And then my mom taught me to love Black people. And, both of those things together, I think kind of lead somebody on this pathway.
This is deep because that just the relate when you say the relationship to failure, we're afraid of failing because it might prove everything that is drilled into us that's negative about us or the deficit. So we're in like a constant cycle to prove ourselves not to be the deficient beings that America has told us that we are. So when you fail at something, you don't want to go back to that thing again because it actually, in some ways, is traumatic confirmation of the stereotype, right? And I don't know,
Hmm.
you probably have dealt with stereotype threat research. I don't understand it very well, to be very honest with you. I've tried to read through it. It just seems to me to mean that if you feel like you're going to get confirmation of the stereotype about yourself, it's not something you want to engage in. It's just, is that right?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
tell
so
me, educate me. Yeah,
because of my
sorry.
studies,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
you came to the right person.
yeah.
Funny enough, so the thing about stereotype threat, the way it works actually has to also do with how the brain is structured because it works across race. It's just that we have racial stereotypes and we have gender stereotypes, and what they've proven is that a stereotype will decrease performance regardless of the race or gender. It's just as long as there's a
Mhm,
stereotype for that race or gender. Now,
mhm,
why would that be the case? Because what happens is that our brains are not multi-processors, right? Like, we got these computers that can do all these different things at the same time. And people like, I'm multitasking. No, you're not. You're switching between one task and the other. Or you've figured out how to do one task so well that it's called like memorization, but basically that thing becomes rote. So I can right now tie my shoes and talk to you at the same time.
mhm,
But that's only because I know how to tie my shoes. You can't ask a 5-year-old to tie their shoes and talk to you at the same time. One of those things
mhm,
is going to fail because they haven't
mhm,
kind of gotten to that memorization cycle for that. And most things that we do, we can't do multiple things like that. Driving, you can kind of do and talk at the same time. But you get what I'm saying? Point being, the point is that your brain is limited in how much information it can function with at one time. And so the more you introduce information into that, the less it can focus on the task at hand. So if you are thinking about disproving the stereotype, then you are not thinking about the math problem that you're supposed to be doing.
mhm,
If you're
mhm,
thinking about disproving the fact that you can't shoot a basketball or play basketball because you're white, then you're not thinking about playing basketball. And the
mhm.
second that you take away from your cognitive resources, you're reducing your ability to do well in that particular thing. And that's how stereotype threat works.
Wow. So there's a couple of things tied up in that to me that are very interesting. Like the first one is if you never have to deal with that, that creates privilege, right? Like
Exactly.
if I could
Yes.
just take a test and I don't have to worry about any type, there's no stereotype of, as a matter of fact, does it work the other way too? Like if you have a powerfully positive stereotype, like when Asian folks take tests, the stereotype is that they're going to do well and that they do well. So does it work the other direction too? That if the stereotype is good, it produces more outcomes?
Yeah. I like to be careful when I don't know something. I say I don't know something. I
Yeah.
don't think so. Not
Yeah.
in that. I think it works in the way. I'm gonna strip it out of that particular context because that's a little
Mhm,
political.
mhm,
What I
mhm,
will say is that you are right. When you are not worried about a stereotype, then you're not eating up that cognitive load, is what it's called, or you're not eating up
mhm,
that working memory to think about it, right? So you do get a benefit or a privilege from that particular thing. Or, I mean, this is a weird way to think about benefit or privilege because we should probably live in a world where everybody doesn't have to worry about that thing.
mhm,
But yes, now the thing that's interesting though is that when you have a positive stereotype though, it can still kind of creep back in because then again you're thinking about like, well, oh, I gotta do well. Right.
mhm,
And so now the
mhm,
second that you're thinking about something that's not germane or specific to the particular learning task is now you're kind of eating back into it. And so that's why a lot of times, you'll see in a lot of the Asian kind of literature, like the folks who study that stuff, they'll talk about the impacts of this kind of like these positive because stereotypes are still stereotypes, right? And so they
mhm.
create a level of expectation of you that is not it's dehumanizing, right? Like it's trying to say that everybody that looks like this particular thing is the same thing. And that's a pretty inhuman thing because we're all really different.
Man, you just throwing out gems to me that like keep my mind curious and racing. Like sometimes what we consider to be positive stereotypes, like sexualization of Black people is considered to be a positive stereotype in a way, but sexualization of Black people comes back to kill you. The hardworking immigrant in the fields is a stereotype that is supposed to be good. Like, you guys are hard workers. Like if I want my roof redone, I call you guys in. And that also could become the stereotype for exploitation, right?
Yeah.
With Jews and money and Indians and 7-Elevens. These are all things where it's supposedly saying something good about you that actually can come around and actually end up being your oppression.
Yeah.
um, I want to go back to this like scientist thinking though. You as a young person who actually appreciated science or liked science or was interested in it, I wonder
Mhm.
what it would do for us to actually have a science focus for Black children. Um, because of what you said about the relationship to failure. Like if you see failure as just data, as you just said, which I think is a powerful way of looking at the world, then does that take away on a lot of the threat that you would have, like, worrying about failing, worrying about stereotypes and all that? If you just think like a scientist, you think no matter what happens here, I'm going to learn from it. It's just going to be information.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's what most scientists would say, right? I think this is like, Neil deGrasse Tyson is like always on this stump, probably around it is just that, I think we kind of pigeonhole science to like chemistry and biology and
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
this less understanding of the natural world. Um, but the unnatural world, which is really the product of humans' imaginations, like the things that we create, can be studied in the same ways, right? Like you can't make some of the same natural conclusions like gravity is always going to work this way because a human created race or a human created banking systems, and so that stuff doesn't have like those absolutes that we have in the universe. But in general, like the scientific method, the approach to science is one that I think is beneficial to folks. And so I think it's really a question about, and in some ways science, it's not the same as learning, but it is a good way to try to support people in learning processes that lead, I think, to better understandings and understandings that are closer to the truth.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because you can
Hmm.
learn anything, right? Like you can learn to be racist. You can learn that exploitation is great. You can learn all kinds of stuff, right? It doesn't mean that it's necessarily true or correct.
Hmm.
And I think
Hmm.
part of the issue we have is that we learn almost how to be biased and tribalist and like and racist and all these other things. And so like our way is the best way, but it's actually not reflective of like a process to get your mind to actually learn the more true thing, which would probably lead us out of, one of my kind of, because of I think my background, one of my things that I'm always skeptical of is like when people get too dogmatic. It's like, oh, I believe this no matter what. You can't tell me anything. And that's why I'm always like, well, wait a minute. I don't know if I could trust you
Hmm.
because now you're more committed to a perspective than you are the truth. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely think I guess I kind of went in a direction I think it's better for society for us to do that. But I also think, to your point, it that type of approach does, I think, benefit Black children in trying to avoid stereotype threat. It's actually tied to, so there is one thing that's been kind of shown to reverse stereotype threat or get away from it, and is essentially teaching kids like growth mindset. So growth mindset
Hmm.
has been shown to kind of, which growth mindset is basically the same thing, which is that like, look, it's not that you can't do something. You just have to believe that you can get smarter. But how do you get smarter? You get smarter by failing a lot of times, right?
Hmm.
Like an effortful fail. I'm not just talking about going and failing a test. Like that's not going to help you. But if it's an effortful fail, then you can like go back and, there's other things that are tied into it. But that's been the one thing that actually kind of shows to kind of like get kids out of or help kids circumvent stereotype threat.
We talk a lot about test scores nationally, and we spend most of our time talking about math and reading as the two primary like areas that we care about. And I think the assumption, or not even the assumption, the premise of that is that reading is the gateway to everything, and literacy is the gateway to everything, and math is how
Hmm.
you decode the world, like scientifically, how you understand. I mean, if you want to talk about police brutality, you can just say police brutality, or you could dig into the
Hmm.
mechanics of it, and then now it's help you understand the world better, right? So these are skills and tools that I don't think all of us learn and have. And when you look at the science numbers, when we talk about math and reading, those numbers are not living up to what they should be, not just for one race or one subgroup, for everybody, like across the United States, everybody, all students are not. And when it comes to math and reading, we like to say that it's an achievement gap, but the students who are in the groups of people who you think are doing the best are still not doing well enough, right, in those areas.
Yeah.
Science is 10 times worse. So we never talk about that
Mm.
third set of test scores. We never talk
Hmm.
about that third area, that area of science. Those are horrible. Those are
Mm.
abysmal for
Hmm.
everybody, right? Which is why we have people in the country who are so easy targets for misinformation, easy
Hmm.
targets for like thinking that. My example I give all the time is that, wildfires in California were started by Jewish laser beams, right? Which is something a
Mm.
sitting
Yeah, that's
member
pretty
of
wild. Yeah.
Congress said, right? A sitting member of Congress said this,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And there's people
Yeah.
who in the world who are so bad on science that it might land with them, you know. The point that I'm getting to is when I think about Black children specifically, tools to be able to decode the world that we live in, so that we don't talk in slogans about our oppression because we can break it down. Actually, I think saves us a lot of time. So when I meet someone like you are a person, number one, we have kids graduating from high school who don't know how to write a paper in MLA or ALA style, for instance. Well, that's a
Hmm.
gate. That's a gate. Like if you don't know how to do
Hmm.
that, like there's a lot of kids graduating from some high school. That's just a second, you know, it's a first thought. They already know how to do it.
Hmm.
I just think about how many of those things I've watched my friends go through processes where how do you write a thesis? Now I know a bunch of people in my network who know how to write a thesis all of a sudden. So that opens a door for me because now I'm seeing the way you guys do your work. And then when you get to people who have done a dissertation, I'm fascinated by it. I have so many now
Hmm.
people in my network who've gone through that process. I love watching it as an outsider because I know you are learning to decode something that I can't. I read your guys' dissertations as a habit now. It's something I just do,
Hmm. Uh-huh.
especially because I want to know what y'all learned. Because the majority of
Hmm.
y'all that do dissertations, you do it on us, our people. So if I were to
Hmm.
pull all that together collectively and put it into a blender, I would have like some of the best research in the world. Our
Yeah.
libraries should have all that work in it. I'm going on and on, but the point that I'm making is you guys start learning how to decode the world differently than the rest of us do, right? Because you're going through those processes. I don't know if you would agree with that, but I'm just wondering if some of those processes don't have to be in the dissertation process or the thesis process. If we could just be informally educating our young people on how to use some of these skills to decode the world that they live in, whether or not they're going to get a dissertation or do a dissertation or not.
I guess there's a couple of things. Well, I'll say three things. Like one, I went back to get a PhD in educational psychology because I wanted to know how kids learn. And a lot of my early study, before I got to kind of the racial socialization and like how discrimination was in self-regulated learning. So that's where I figured out the stuff about stereotype threat. That's, I kind of know the basics of learning. I know that learning is connecting new information to prior knowledge. That's how I know you can learn wrong stuff. Because you don't that it isn't you're not a you're not a computer, right? Like you can make whatever connections you want to make, and then you can solidify those connections, right? And so I wanted to learn that because as a teacher, I didn't think I did a good job of supporting students to become independent learners. That doesn't mean I didn't have a lot of independent learners in my classroom. I just didn't think I was doing anything to advance that. I thought I was really
Mm-hmm.
good at understanding their prior knowledge because I was from Atlanta, they were from Atlanta. And so like it was easy for me to make cultural connections to the new information that they needed to make to their prior knowledge. Right. Like I was good at and understood and can appreciate the prior knowledge that they would bring into the classroom. The better you can do that as a teacher, the easier it is for you to get them to see how this new information fits to what they already know. Boom,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now you're helping kids pass tests. But that does not necessarily mean that I am helping you be a good planner of information. I am helping you be a good judger of the information that you've already learned, because that's a big issue in kind of the learning spaces. So that's what like the whole like self-regulated learning and independent learning field talks about. Other things that you're kind of saying is like, what does it mean to become a good learner? Like, how do you kind of manage your own learning process? I think, that would be helpful. The other thing, I kind of think about is I'm forgetting one, but Don Henderson is somebody who has worked at Village of Wisdom for the last few years. And the thing that I think is really beautiful about what Dawn has done for the organization is she's basically gotten everybody to see that everybody's a researcher. And everybody has already probably done research, and you just maybe have not been aware of it. Because for most people,
Mm-hmm.
if you've done anything at any kind of high level, you've taken information, you've made sense of that information, and then you've jumped to some kind of conclusion, which I would argue that means that everybody is a scientist in their own particular way. But part of it is that you have to embrace that identity to refine that identity to get better at that particular identity. And so I think, Don just does a really beautiful job of one, affirming people in their researcher identity and then supporting them in developing those particular identities, right? And so I think if we were thinking about, oh, okay, well, what does it mean to support students in doing that, then yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like you probably end up with students who are more independent in terms of their pursuit of knowledge and also have better parameters or guides around that so that they're not kind of led astray. And I don't
Mhm.
remember the third point, but I think that's enough points.
That's a lot of points. That's a lot of good information. So I'm usually, when I think about these issues, thinking about as a father, what do I need to do as much as I possibly can, even when I don't understand things? Like, what's the most
Mhm.
I could do? So when you say something to me like bringing out the researcher and all of us, for me as a dad, that starts setting off things in my mind. Well, what does that mean for me? I've got these
Yeah.
multiple children in my care every day. Am I doing enough? You know, I'm trying to like figure it out as a father. And then, I run small conversations with other fathers where we talk to each other like, how did you learn what you know? And how did you
Mm,
develop your philosophy as a father? How did you develop your style? Did you have one? Right?
mm,
Did you like, and so when you say things like this to me, I'm like thinking to myself, what's the layperson's view of these things? What could we be doing at home for our kids to make sure it's a learning environment that does some of what your parents did for you, inoculates our children, gets them thinking like scientists or researchers, helping them understand everything you just said to me, man, could be a book for us, like helping them understand their relationship to failure. These are all chapters for us, right?
yeah.
Like, and we don't, as fathers, we talk about mothers, but we don't often, I don't think we talk enough about fathers and their place within the village, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if any of that resonates with you, but I do have a focus on helping parents that are not steeped in all of this walk away with small things, concrete things that they could be doing at home for young people.
Yeah, one thing I think about with my parents is that like it wasn't just a say thing. Like my mom didn't
Mm-hmm.
just tell me about these scientists. Like she loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And she
Mm-hmm.
loves it. Like I see it with my own kids. Like she calls, one of them her little astronaut and the other one is her little botanist, right? Like and
Mm-hmm.
and
Wow.
when it comes time to do an experiment, like she's not like go do the experiment. She's sitting down there with her like l- amazed and wow and I can't
Mm-hmm.
believe it. Did you
Mm-hmm.
see that? Like, you know what I mean? And so I think that there is this thing that as parents sometimes we are trying to tell our kids and show our kids and and direct our kids. And I think one of the things that as I think about my mom even more is just like she was with me. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
It's one thing
mhm,
to say love these things. It's another thing to show me how to love these things.
mhm.
Right? Like it's one thing for my dad to say like failure isn't the end. It's another thing literally for me to be there while he's cursing his way through fixing something.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean? And so like I
yeah.
think sometimes, we're searching for the parenting,
Mhm,
right, as maybe as opposed to the being with. Right. And kids don't always love that. Like I didn't always like love kind of being there with my dad, but a lot of the time I did. Like I thought it was really
mhm.
interesting. There are things that, people could never take away from me. I had to work on my refrigerator, a couple weeks back. And like, in many ways it reminded me of my relationship with my dad. And he's still here and all that other stuff. But like I wouldn't have been able to do the stuff that I was doing on that refrigerator if he hadn't spent that time with me.
Mhm,
I
mhm,
think you're right. Like these, and I think that this is what Dawn is really good at. She's good at showing us what we already do is an example of something that somebody has said is scientifically proven.
mhm,
Right.
mhm.
And so with like and we've done this across the course of Village of Wisdom's history. And this is something that, Don also showed us was like, y'all been doing this. Like we maybe not giving yourselves enough credit. Like our Black Genius framework is a framework that is built off of what Black parents have told us. Black parents told us that my child ain't interested in what's happening inside of the school. Black parents told us there's not enough Black history in here. Black parents told us that my child don't trust these teachers.
Mhm, mm,
But so why does that matter? Like what's my point there? My point is that there are two researchers named DC and Ryan that got this really popular paper on self-determination theory. And what is the main finding of self-determination theory? It is to say that if you are not intrinsically motivated by something, then you cannot sustain a higher order learning task.
hmm.
So when that black mom or black dad comes into a school and says that my kid isn't actually interested in what's happening here, that is a threat to that baby's ability to do higher oral learning. Not because they can't do it, it's because you haven't found a way to make it relevant.
Mhm, mhm,
And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that we all sometimes struggle with recognizing our own genius because of how we have been socialized in this country to make us believe that the stuff that we say is not actually statistically and scholastically valid.
mhm,
It
mhm,
absolutely is. Especially if it's something that you done heard somebody else repeat and you've kind of been in relationship with it and you've observed it. Now, maybe you didn't write it down. Maybe you didn't go on all out with the study. But what I will tell you is that all six of them elements that we picked up from parents and we went and did a study with more than 1,000 students, that stuff was tied to attendance. It was tied to suspensions and some of it was tied to better grades.
hmm.
But yet and still, I would still see a teacher tell a parent that that thing didn't matter. But don't let Brene Brown come around and say, "Oh, we need to be vulnerable with folks," and because if we are vulnerable, then that means that we can love, we can create, and we can learn. Then everybody's clapping their hands.
Mhm, mhm,
But then if a black mama says, "Well, my child doesn't trust you," and I think that that's the issue in this particular classroom, then you're like, "Well, that kid needs to figure out how to trust me."
mhm.
But that you get what I'm saying? But
I
that is a
do.
very valuable insight. But maybe it's not in the wrapper that we want, right? Maybe it's a little too black how it's coming to you, right? But I think the thing is like, how do we lean into our own wisdom? How do we lean into the village's wisdom, right? And so, like, I'm super thankful to folks like Dawn for reminding us that this is the stuff that our organization has done. But I think even for ourselves, like, how do we kind of deepen our own commitments to our own wisdom? And that doesn't mean like I'm not trying to support, the fugazi stuff that people come up with. But if you do start to
What's the fugazi
investigate,
stuff?
sometimes people be on the margins and kind of coming up with stuff and it's not really a good, I would say, it's not based in fact. Like there is
Mhm,
no
mhm,
scientific method there. You haven't kind of seen how this stuff has kind of pulled together. There's no reason to necessarily believe that, right? Like I'm not coming up with a great example right now, but I do think sometimes we're at the margins and you hear people say stuff and you're like, no, that ain't. I don't think that that's true. You know what I
I mean,
mean?
this is a good thing to point out because we have our own version of Jewish space lasers. Like I point
Yeah.
that out, in the congressperson, but we have some of our own version of that happening at the fringes. All right. Well, listen, I want to ask you a tough question, and this isn't
Hmm.
really tough, but this is devil's advocate type of stuff,
Uh huh.
right? Because you're the perfect person to beat up what I'm about to say. But just realize I'm saying this from a devil's advocate standpoint, right?
Yeah.
So you go into a community and you right now have a TikTok challenge of people who believed that there was a glitch in Chase Bank's system where if you deposited a check
Mm-hmm.
and took the money out right away from the ATM, it was a glitch and you could just get the money. So now
Mm-hmm.
you have this group of people all across the country who did this, took
Yeah.
out the money, didn't have it. They thought it was a glitch because TikTok told them that or whatnot. What that actually is federal wire fraud. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a bunch of people about to go to jail because they
Mm-hmm.
believed in a glitch, right? In the system. And now we have people that are literally about to be on federal charges because of something
Mm-hmm.
that and they're just discovering that now. Like, oh my God, I didn't know this was a crime, bruh. You didn't know it was a crime to deposit a check and try and take the money out right away. I'm only
Mm-hmm.
saying this to say a broader point around the idolization of entertainment, the idolization of mind numbingness things, cultures that don't really produce resistance. And, the whole Lil Wayne thing, like at my age, like, listen, man, I look at the Lil Wayne generation. Every time somebody says that he's a genius, I like want to fall out of my chair because of how old I am and where I come from. And I'm looking at a
Mm-hmm.
dude who said Black lives don't matter and there is no such thing as racism anymore because I'm rich and because my fans are white. How could they be racist? How could America be racist? I'm talking about dudes standing with Trump, right? I'm talking about entertainers standing with Trump and telling their legion of followers to go that direction. And because we are so entertainment addicted and we are not addicted to calculus and trigonometry and to other things. Now realize I'm saying this as a I'm
Devil's
saying this as
advocate.
a
Mm-hmm. Devil's
devil's
advocate.
advocate type of
Yeah, I'm
situation.
with you. Uh-huh.
It seems like you arrive at a community and you want to do powerful work that is collectivist work that pulls people in the right, has everybody rowing in the same direction with not an addiction to corporate entertainment that is like ruining our lives or whatever. It feels like that's a very hard job. In my mind, it feels like it's a very hard job to go to a community where you have a lot of that going on. And by that, I mean, this addiction to entertainment and to superfluous things and a lack of seriousness about the things that will save us. It almost feels like over time, America retrained us to our own detriment in a way. I'm old enough to remember pushes in the 70s and in the 80s that were still very socially conscious, focused. We're all in this together. Listen, there was always fratricide to some extent, but now it seems to be at a fever pitch. There was always kind of, entertainment. We cared about disco at one
Yeah.
point. There was always that, funk, parliament, all that type of
Mhm.
stuff was always a thing. But that was wallpaper. That wasn't the main thing. That was wallpaper behind this sense that we are still collectively in trouble and we're still in a fight for our life. That was still alive then in a way that it doesn't seem now. So it seems hard. But look at a community that is rife with things that need to be put in order and rife with things that need to be fixed to help the lives of everybody and feel like you can actually do it. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know where the question is really there, but it feels like you're fighting an uphill battle. Even as a parent, you're fighting entertainment as kind of like a cultural teacher,
Yeah.
right? So as a collective community, you're really fighting that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely hear that. And I think, I appreciate the devil's advocate. And I do think that this is a really prominent devil's advocate, right? I guess it's a thing that I think folks tend to go to. I mean, I think there's so many ways to kind of dissect that particular argument. I think, one way is that, I would call it ahistorical, right? Like it's not,
Mm,
I think it tends to be a surface level assessment of even what's going on then and what's going on now. Um, because to your point, you know, uh, RIP to Frankie Beverly Mays, like you could call that just music.
hmm
You could say that Frankie Beverly and Mays is just wallpaper.
mm-mm. But it wasn't. It
You would
wasn't.
you would be absolutely lying.
That's true. This is true.
You could say Stevie Wonder is just a cool artist,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it would be so clear that you missed the point.
This is true.
Um,
Okay, but
and
wait a
so,
second now, Dr. Jackson. You're kind of making the devil's advocate point in one way too, though.
well, yeah, because
Look at a
you
Tracy Chapman, look at a Taj Mahal, look at a
mhm.
Bob Marley, look at a Stevie Wonder, like you just mentioned, and a Frankie Beverly and Mays. There is a therapeutic and politically important aspect of their music in a way that I said Lil Wayne.
Well, Lil Wayne is also the guy who made the song about the levees breaking
Ye-
with
I,
Robin Thicke.
yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
and Lil
yeah,
Wayne is not the
yeah,
totality of rap.
yeah, yeah. Okay,
You got Lupe Fiasco, you got J. Cole, you got Kendrick Lamar,
okay.
you got Wale. Like there are and a whole bunch of people that, now I'm getting kind of old. And so I don't even know all of the new rappers. But like these are
Yeah.
people. You have Outkast, like you have Scarface.
Mhm, mhm,
If you doubted the quality and the artistry behind rap, especially Southern rap in the 90s, and you haven't gone and watched his Tiny Desk,
mhm, mhm,
you will not appreciate the level of artistry that this man has. And I had not. Like I had even overlooked it. And I looked at him and I said, he is a genius.
mhm,
He
mhm,
is an underappreciated genius. And oftentimes this is kind of like what we do. And so I am not going to give white supremacy the credit to say that it beat it out of us.
mhm,
It
mhm,
absolutely has not. Our ancestors have done and did too much for these little piddly things that they're trying to do to us to rip us of all our humanity. It is the greatest Black tradition.
It is. It is. And, we've talked about this on the Eight Black Hands podcast several times because, we have four people. We have Sharif El-Mekki, me, Dr. Cole, who's a lifelong kind of, he's younger than us by about 10 years, 15 years or so. And so we had a generational discussion about this. And then we had different points of view on this. Me and Sharif, for instance, come from the Public Enemy generation.
Yeah.
So we're missing something right now. We're
Yeah.
missing something. We're just like 100%. There were no niggas and hoes in Public Enemy music. There just wasn't. It just wasn't there, right? So this is actually, I think, a good and rich conversation because we are coming to a place, though, where well, first of all, the thing that we did say in that discussion that is important to me is that our culture was commoditized, not by us. And now today, if you look at it as a business, they're selling us the messages that we're sucking down that we're not necessarily creating for ourselves. Like they're determining which of us get the contract,
Yeah.
right? And there was a lot of talk about why they were choosing who they were choosing over time as they commodified us.
Well, and I think that this is also where popularity starts to kind of, in market forces in capitalism, I guess more so than market forces, like, because I got some friends that would be like, make the distinction, right? Like capitalism, the absolute pursuit of pure profit drives a certain type of musical content, right? But then you also have people who reemerge, like a Toby Nwigwe, who's like basically a black dad all the time while he's rapping. You got Pierce Freeline, who's here from Durham, who's making black children's music, who's rapping, right? Like, and you probably wouldn't know about a Toby, right? 10 years ago because of how the music industry has been disrupted. And so in some ways, even the human condition continues to kind of ebb and flow because I don't think pure capitalism is actually humanistic. And so there's only but so far you can get before there's a retraction. And I think the other thing that we tend to do is we tend to pay attention to these people at the margins more than we do at the people in the middle. And so our minds are naturally attuned to the irregular because the irregular is essential. It's important for us to pay attention to the irregular for our human, for survival, right? Like I think our base instincts has us point to the irregular because like that could be scary. It could kill me, something. So I got to pay attention to that. But what that also means is like the normal everyday stuff, we don't pay as much attention to, right? And so we start to kind of believe that everybody is kind of doing this and every rapper now is Sexy Red, right? And it's not Cheekway, right? And like, and these are just two completely quality differences in terms of like the experiences. But also I don't want to get too lost in like the music and culture thing, which I think for us, it is very, very important. So I'm not trying to minimize it. But what I'm also trying to say is that like also our culture of survival and creativity and genius has been the thing that has carried us to this point to where we should have been dead. Right. And I refuse to believe that is gone because I see so many young people still fighting for those things. Like we do have a Dream Defenders. We do have a Black Youth Project. We do have organizations now that researchers and historians will talk about in 20, 30 years from now. And people will look back and they'll do the nostalgia thing and say like, oh, we're not doing it like that. And there literally will be Black organizations existing right now that you did not know about because you're not in the culture like that, right? And so like, I think we always have to be careful of how we kind of slip into nostalgia and then minimize the advancements of our young people in particular, because we have to think about now then, what are we doing in terms of even reaffirming the thing that we say we didn't want to do?
This is good.
We are becoming the thing that we said we don't like, which is the people who tell us that we aren't capable, that we're not doing something, that all the, like what's the distance between saying young people are lost and Black mamas are welfare queens? That's not a distance I'm trying to ever argue. I don't want to be anywhere in that spectrum. Put me on a whole different spectrum, please, right? Because like that does not align with my beliefs about who Black people are, what we're capable, and all those other things. And so I do think this is like, where I'll kind of land with this whole thing is that one, we had a staff member who's, now a partner telling Mary Weber Fields, and she would talk a lot about spaciousness. And the reason why she would talk about spaciousness is because she was just like, we're asking people to do difficult stuff, to your point. And we're asking people to do difficult stuff under dire conditions because of the systems and the histories that are in place. If you're going to ask people to do that, then you need to give them the time to process that information, and you shouldn't rush them, because this is what we always do. We rush people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you want somebody to break away from that devil's advocate mentality, then you have to give them the space and time to break it away, right? And I think this is what Trisha Hershey's like nap ministry and all this other stuff is trying to say, is that like, actually, in some ways, the devil's advocate is right. And this is where I would say it's right. You are not going to find the solutions to mainstream media. Said another way, the revolution will not be televised. And I don't know if he necessarily meant it like that. I think what he was saying is they're not going to teach you how to break this system through the main media aspect. Not to say that that couldn't find its way onto television, which I think are two different things, but that's a interesting diatribe. I guess what I'm trying to say, though, is that when you go to community and you treat folks like humans and you give them a taste of humanity, and then you tell them to dream their wildest dream, then they dream that from a place of humanity, not inhumanity. And so oftentimes what we're doing is we're going to people, we're having a focus group conversation with them 30 minutes after we met them, while they spent their whole last 3 months in inhumane conditions, and then we're wondering why they didn't come up with a human dream.
A humane dream.
A humane dream, right? Like that.
Yeah.
So what is actually your commitment to your community? Are you committed enough to create a humane environment to get a humane dream? Because we do need radically different imaginations to create the world that we're looking to see. And we cannot just assume that that imagination is just inside of myself, right? And this, I guess, gets back to my whole original point. You do not get a village of wisdom with one person. And so we cannot get so enamored with our own ideas that we don't give people the same benefits and all this other stuff of ourselves. Because then we do the same thing. We create these like very myopic and one-dimensional dreams. And the dream of Village of Wisdom is so much better because of all of these different people who've been around me. And all of the different ways that they've taken this dream in a place that I never would have seen. And so, I would just big up you for saying like, yeah, like community is important. Learning from each other is important. Seeing value in people from all kinds of different walks of life is important. And let us not ever find ourselves somewhat stamping out somebody else's opinion or their commitment because we've been brainwashed into believing that those folks aren't worthy for whatever reason.
So I want to push on this a little bit. That gets us to the framework, to the Village of Wisdom framework. But before on the way there, because see, I'm going to keep pushing on this devil's advocate stuff with you, right? Because it helps us get there. As an old person, as a person my age, I should say, one of the things that was drilled into me early on was the fact that things aren't neutral. If we were starting with our community to fix problems today that were neutral, where the context was neutral and all we had to do was fight for improvement, that would be one thing. But that actually takes away from the idea that we might still be under attack. Right. So from years ago, we used to worry about things about CIA programming of our social and artistic institutions. We used to worry about the FBI doing a subterfuge on us and implanting things in our communities. We used to know that the guns don't show up by themselves. The drugs didn't show up by themselves. So we are actively seeing things still show up. So we're being programmed into the life that somebody else, we're in the middle of somebody else's strategic plan. Right. So it's not neutral. So we could come to our community with love and try and do loving things within our community. And if we were just in a neutral context, that would help us start moving the direction towards positive work and positive healing. But the fact of the matter is, we're just like a day away from another crack showing up, another gun showing up, another breaking up of the Black Panther Party, another of overshadowing the fact that we had a breakfast program that we started for ourselves, right?
Mhm.
So it was like all the good work that Black organizations try to do over time, they never did it in a neutral context. They always
Mhm.
did it in the context of people not even believing that we're under siege, and we actually are, right?
Yeah.
So even like the Village of Wisdom, to me, is the weapon or the tool in some ways. And I hate to call it these things. I'm always afraid I'm going to misuse language, but I mean, it is the rightful response. We have to respond to what has been done to us and the attacks that are on us. And we can't live there only either, though. We also have to do some self-determined positive steps forward that have nothing to do with anybody else, right?
Mhm.
So there's not a question in there really, except for like, let's walk towards the Village of Wisdom framework. So you could tell us more about that. But I did want to make this point about the fact that when I make this criticism of like rap, for instance, or hip hop, it comes from my suspicion that we are
Mhm.
being programmed by powers and principalities above us. And the way that they've always done it is by using our culture, our cultural speakers, some of our influencers, even some of our nonprofits, that used to be revolutionary, whatever. So I'm always suspicious. I'm just suspicious of that all the time.
I think there's a well-placed suspicion, right? Um, yeah. So I'm with you there. I think
It
there's
almost
some
creates, I should
distinction.
say, it almost creates nihilism in me,
Mm. Mhm.
right? It almost creates like a hopelessness.
Well, I appreciate you because that was a line that I was gonna. I think that's getting me close to the line of it. Right? Is suspicion and criticality is one side of a spectrum, and I think we have to
Mhm.
be really careful to not fall into nihilism and
Mm,
pessimism and
mhm,
all of these other things. Right? Like criticality is somewhat hopeful. Um, because it is a reflection of a desire for something better.
mhm, mhm,
Nihilism is like, it just is what it is, and folks can't change.
mhm, mhm,
And uh, everything you touch, you change, and everything that you change changes you, right? Like, Octavia Butler. So, like, I think we have to be careful there. And I think that this is also, I'll kind of loop this into like what Village of Wisdom has done because, I said, hey, Village of Wisdom was about getting parents together to talk to their kids about positively affirming them around their blackness and preparing them for discrimination. And, about halfway through the last 10 years, we were like, that's a really reactive strategy. Like that,
mhm,
that is almost uh, giving oneself over, uh, kind of giving up and saying like, hey, these kids just going to experience discrimination. That's how it's going to be. Um, and I get viscerally upset, like emotionally, I feel my heart beat getting faster. The tension of anger coming up, thinking about the fact that my dad told me how to survive a traffic stop, and me having that same conversation with my daughters.
mhm, mhm,
Like, just to think about the fact that something that he probably learned in the 1960s will still be valid in 2030 is a very infuriating idea to me.
mhm, mhm,
And in some ways, I hope that I am a part of a community that makes that conversation not true for my grandchildren or my great grandchildren. Right. And I don't want to be so nihilistic, right? To think that like, ooh, that's not possible. And so Village of Wisdom moved from a place of like trying to get parents to prepare their kids for that to trying to get parents to create culturally affirming learning environments where that did not happen. Because actually the space between those things is not that different. Me
mhm,
thinking about how to
mhm,
affirm my child and me telling other people and creating other experiences for them to actually experience this in their learning environments is not that different from the first thing. It's just a different focus. And so for Village of Wisdom, the thought was, and this points back to your whole point about power, right? Power is not reacting to a condition that somebody else set for me.
hmm, mhm,
Power is creating a condition for me to live in. And so how do we move Village of Wisdom to a place to where we are creating the conditions of the learning environments that our children are in? And one of the ways that we do that in a human world where so many things have been imagined is to imagine new standards, new frameworks, new rules of engagement for those learning environments. And so if you don't have a standard to hold somebody to, right? For those of us who live in the South and have access to Chick-fil-A's, I know there's like different political things, but you do know that there's a certain level of quality at a Chick-fil-A because of what is happening. You're going to have a certain experience when you go to Chick-fil-A because they've set a clear standard. And so what we decided at Village of Wisdom is that we were going to take the Black Genius Framework and we were going to make it a clear standard. And it was going to be a standard that I already told you was built by Black parents. And then we were going to use that standard to create models of what an educational learning environment looked like. And we were also going to create measures so we could say whether or not that was it or it is or it's not. And then we would even give people an opportunity to experience it, a Black Genius Fest, right? Or they would be able to see it inside of a classroom because that teacher has experienced professional development that involved a Black parent that helped to explain to them what a Black Genius Framework looked like, or even helped them in using their own data to refine their practice to become more culturally affirming, right? That's our Department of Education grant. And so what do all of those things do? They create standards, they create models, they create measures. These are all things from our imagination that are now manifesting a learning environment. And so now we have dictated the quality of an experience for somebody. And when you start to dictate the quality of an experience, that is a power move. It's not the only power move. There's other ways to do power, right? But from a scholastic kind of scientific knowledge way, that is how you leverage the generation of knowledge to create power. Because a lot of people like to say knowledge is power. No, knowledge is understanding how power works. Creating knowledge is power.
Unpack that one a little bit. That's deep. So knowledge is not power.
Knowledge is understanding how power works. And so, yes, it makes you more capable of navigating power, and it might help you amass some power because you know how to navigate it. But if you really want to create power, you will change how people think, see, and operate inside of a world. And in order to do that, you have to create your own knowledge. Like we've even talked about this across the conversation. You were like, there's a book in there, right? Like, why are books powerful? Because they dictate how people behave.
Wow. Yeah, I love this. I love this. So the creation of the knowledge is where the real power lies.
Yeah, Gloria Lansing Billings created culturally responsive pedagogy. And so since 1996, for almost the last 30 years, people have been trying to figure out how to be culturally responsive at a larger scale than previous because she created the term. And so that was powerful because she created knowledge.
And I don't want to go off track because I know we don't have much more time, but this is such an important point to me. So when I think about Dr. Bettina Love, who we've done one of these shows with, and I think about the fact that the Wisconsin legislature tried to outlaw her work by law. And as a matter of fact, they had a list of words that they wanted to outlaw from education, period. And in those list of words were things like spirit murdering. And where does that come from? That comes from, so you know that you have done something when a state legislature wants to outlaw words from your book and concepts from what you have put. Man, this is like, that's a connection point for what you just said to me. That's got to be power. If a legislature is that worried that your concept is that dangerous to understand, that means you did something.
Yeah.
That means you did. And you know, I was once critical of her. I'm going to have to, just because of you just said this and I made that connection, I'm going to have to send her a mea culpa on this. Because man, that's such a deep thought of like creating knowledge is where the real power is. Wow.
Yeah. And I'll just say real quickly, I owe Bettina Love a lot because she was a professor of mine in grad school and reading her books and all that other stuff. And so she's definitely one of the people who, she actually gave me an assignment that I think in many ways helped me re-understand my own people. she had
Mm.
us go back to our students and ask them questions about like, why is there a distance between teachers and the school? And I remember one of my students, because of the project she had us do, saying that because y'all don't come to the school or because y'all don't come to our community. And I was like, what you talking about? I live right down the street. He was like, you ain't never been at no barbecue. Like, you don't come to our churches. You aren't
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I, just big ups to Bettina. You send a text message, please, let her know. That was Will. But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Well, no. I just think this is the important point. You just made me make a connection to which you made another connection to another connection, which tells me how our strategies just in the world have to be built on relationships and exchange and connectedness and networking, whatever. That's where the real power in my mind is in
Hmm.
relationships and networking.
Yeah,
And the reason I read all of your dissertations is because you guys put a lot of work and effort into that for a goal. But then what happens to it after that, to me, dissertations should be community libraries. Like, because most of you, Dr. Bettina Love and Chris Emden, and keep going down the list, have studied us and have put some rigorous thought into it,
yeah,
of which I feel like if we put it all together, we would have the best library in the world, right?
for sure.
Well, if we took out the parts, and people who watch me know I argue about, I complain about this all the time. That
Mhm.
section where it has all those Greek letters and all that that alien writing and stuff, the statistical stuff and whatever. If y'all could just take that part out and all the methodology and just give us the conclusion, you know, that would be helpful. I don't even know why y'all do all that crazy lettering and stuff in there or whatever. But I would love to understand. I would love our young people to understand it. I would love our people to understand what is in those papers, like that,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of information about us. But listen, brother, I appreciate this so much, and I want to keep talking to you because I want to talk to you again because I'm sure there are like 8 things in this that I want to pull on again. So hopefully you will come back and we can talk more about some of the real pieces of wisdom that you dropped, I think, in this podcast. But there's like several things. I got several topics, like I was taking notes as we were talking today to come back to. What do you want people to know about Village of Wisdom, and how can they find you? And is there any way for folks to support Village of Wisdom?
Yeah, for sure. So, Village of Wisdom, like I've kind of said before, we're an organization that's really focused on generating a knowledge that our community needs to create ideal and affirming learning environments for
Hmm.
Black children, creating the standards for that, creating the models for that. And I think more and more what people will see from us is their ability and way to participate in that process. For now, I would say, we got a brand new website. Uh, it's really dope. So I'd encourage people to go to villageofwisdom.org, go down to the bottom of the page, sign up, put your email in there. We'd love to have you on our newsletter. And we'll be sending out opportunities for folks to kind of learn more about our work and how to get engaged in this knowledge creation process, this standard setting process. Um, we'll probably be doing a webinar. I don't know when this podcast will come out, but we'll be doing a webinar close to the end of September. So if you sign up, you'll be able to register for that, and we'll make sure people get that information. If you liked anything that I said today, we would definitely love a donation. It's definitely greatly appreciated, and I promise you that it will most likely go in the hands of Black parents because about 80% of our revenue goes in the hands of Black folks. So if you're looking for a way
Hmm.
to support Black people, uh, look no further. And yeah, man, I just really appreciate you taking the time to kind of sit down and talk to me about this. I would love, obviously, to come back on here. I appreciate what you're doing to get all of our stories, all of our dissertations into one place, and to have us talk about it in a way that people can kind of understand. And the last thing I would just say, yo, is like, believe in Black people, believe in Black genius,
Hmm. Hmm.
and mean it and do it and participate in it. And the more we do that, the more you're helping Village of Wisdom. So if you don't do anything else, just believe in your own genius. Don't give up. And keep up the good fight, yo.
Well, I want people to do more than that, but yeah, I'll take it. But so first of all, for people listening, I want to drill down on this. Villageofwisdom.org is the website. It is a dope website. You just told me yesterday or day before that you all had redone it. So when I went in and looked at it, I don't remember really the previous version of it, but this version is amazing. It's like it's a work of art. So people should go there. There's a big button at the top that says donate to the top right. And I always push this same message: we all can be philanthropists. we all
Mm.
could put our money where our mouth is. And I don't care how small or how large it is, it's just making the commitment to something. So if it means, you're going to drop that latte for today or this week, I don't think anybody's going to hate you for sending $5 or $10 or
Mm.
$15.
Absolutely not.
And by the way, we used to build black schools this way with quarters and dimes and nickels. And we had a whole generation of black middle class people that came out of those dimes and nickels and quarters. So when you hear me give a message like this, it is to, first of all, just click that donate button. Just click
Yeah.
it. I don't care how much you have in your pocket to give because you spend it on something else that is, that could be left alone for just once.
Yeah.
Anyway, so appreciate you, brother. And as always, to the people who listen and to watch us, we appreciate you too. Please share the show. Always Learning is a series of these type of discussions where we are curious about what our experts and our leaders know and what we can share with the world and share with our young people so that they know it too. So please share the show and keep watching. We'll see you on the next episode of Always Learning.